Hi, fam. Come on in and grab a seat on the couch. My name is Dr. Chris, and this is my co host, Jordan, and we are the faces of melanin culture from the couch. Jordan, tell them what we're talking about today.
All right, so we're going to dive into the topic of Black love, more specifically relationships and even like some family trends and things that we're seeing lately, just to maybe even kind of debunk some myths that may have been out there lately and different things of that nature.
All right, so let's get into this. So today happens to be Valentine's Day, right? So we're recording this on Valentine's Day, and Jordan and I were thinking, like, okay, let's talk about Black love. And I had to stop and think for a minute, like, wait, what are some examples in real life that we have of Black love? And I was like, Jordan, I can't think of any, like, besides maybe Michelle and Obama. And then I guess people could say, I don't know, what are your thoughts on that, Jordan?
I think it's hard to look to Hollywood, for some of these examples just because of just the industry and those things typically have, what they say, like a shelf life. In the industry and stuff. Like you said, I mean, I feel like, what's his name? Denzel Washington's been with his wife for a long time. LeBron James and his wife, been together for a long time. Doesn't mean it's a great, healthy relationship, but based on what we've seen, those have been some, I guess, like decent examples compared to some of the other stuff we've seen where there's been like a lot of drama or a lot of things coming out in the media. So I think it just kind of depends. But I think that sometimes, well, I think what I've seen personally, I think the people around me, everybody has their own stuff going on, but I think, my personal family and friends have had some pretty healthy relationships too, like some good examples of like Black love per se. So, and I think it's also like who you kind of choose to be around, or who you choose to, to spend your time with makes a big difference with that too.
Yes, you're absolutely right. I mean, because something that I always ask my clients is, where did you learn how to be in relationship, right? Like, where did you learn how to love? Did you watch that from your mom and dad? Did you have uncles and aunts and or brothers, cousins? And so you're right. I mean, like even something for me when I think of, my parents were married for 25 years and they were, whew, it was rough. But every time like in the morning I would go into their room before school and my parents would be hugged up. It was like nothing happened the night before. Like they didn't just have an argument, full out argument the night before, because every
Right,
single
right.
morning they were hugged up. Okay. And it's interesting because my parents are divorced. They've been divorced since I was 21, so almost 20 years. When my dad is sick, he goes to my mom's house and lays in her bed and she makes him soup. Like, mind you, my dad has since remarried. But my mom takes care of him because his wife doesn't live here. His wife lives in another place. Right? But again,
Okay, that
but
makes
here's the
sense.
interesting thing, Jordan. When I talk about these things with Caribbean people, for example, who are Jamaican or Haitian or Guyanese, they're like, yeah, that's normal. Because for Caribbean families, Caribbean couples, this is normal behavior. Once you've been married, your husband and your wife, even when you're divorced, they're forever like your husband and your wife. It's the weirdest thing. And nobody questions it. Nobody asks about it. Everybody just mind their own business.
And the new wife is okay with that.
Of course not. Of course not. But here's the thing. It's almost like if the new wife was doing her if the new wife was around and was doing what was needed to be done, then there wouldn't be space for that to happen. But for example, like my dad's wife lives in Jamaica. So she's never here in America, right? So when my dad is sick, she's never here. She doesn't even like she's not going to jump on a plane and be like, "Oh, let me come take care of you." She's living her life in Jamaica and my dad is here and he and my mom, like I said, they're like Batty and Bench. They do everything together. like as if they're still married. And again, for Caribbean people, they're like, yeah, that's normal. I mean, Americans, like, you're looking at like, wait, what? This is weird. I don't know how I feel about that.
I've heard some different situations similar to that, so I'm not totally surprised.
Now, here's the thing though, that couldn't work for me, right? But I think part of that is also, culturally, I didn't grow up in Jamaica or Guyana. Like I didn't live most of my life there. So my perception of relationships and what boundaries are is very different than what my parents do and see, because I have like kind of an American foundation. So yeah, all of that to say it's very, very important where we learned how to be in relationship, because that ultimately influences so much about who we become within our own relationship. Like when you think about, you know, your parents, did you ever see things and then sometimes you think like, oh shoot, I do those things too? Do you ever have those moments?
That's a good question, and I think sometimes it's like you just find yourself like behaving like your parents sometimes, for whatever reasons. But I think my example was I think pretty decent to a certain extent. Like my parents had their own issues at times, and like big issues at times, right? But for the most part, they were able to kind of weather some of those storms and figure it out. So that's something I guess I was able to kind of learn, pick up on too. But I think for myself, it's kind of like one of those things where like you don't know what you're getting into sometimes when you get married or you settle down in a relationship. Like it's just different, And I think what they don't tell you too is how like over time how much things change, how you change as an individual, and how that can affect the relationship. And things aren't always like they were when you first met. You know what I'm saying? Like that makes a big difference. And I think sometimes too, like you see where like people like neglect themselves, within the relationship sometimes because maybe they're overly committed to the relationship, or it's a career, or it's like you have children or something like that. So dynamics change sometimes, and that has a big effect too.
You're absolutely right. And it's something that like I always, there's like this thing that I share with my clients. Hold on. I want to read it to you about women changing in the relationship, and something that I think that you're right, that people don't realize how much, especially as women, we change within the relationship, right? Women change 7 to 8 times within the course of the relationship. And each time, the only way that a man is able to stay with her and for the two of them to grow is like giving enough space, right? Because you guys are growing and changing too, but I feel like men don't grow and change so drastically. Whereas, like, for a lot of times for women, we grow and change drastically, right? For the most part, you guys kind of like stay, you go a little up or a little down, but for the most part, you guys stay kind of in the same place. Whereas for us, we're dealing with not just change emotionally, but physical change too, because of having babies and then menopause and all the things. And you're right. And how do you maintain loving someone when the person that you love, who you were initially attracted to, doesn't even live here anymore? Right? Like,
Right, right.
you are literally not the same woman that I met. You don't look the same. And that's not to say like a bad thing, but it's just different. But even with that, Jordon, what do you think it is that allows people to push past that to then get to know each other for where they are now and to maintain the relationship?
I think it's definitely the effort. Like if you don't put in the effort, you're not going to have that
Yeah.
connection. Like I said, life will definitely just like come and just hit you. Like you're just doing the day to day, the cycle. Eat, sleep, work, repeat. And if you don't make that connection, or make those efforts to make that connection, you're not going to have it. And I see a lot too when I work with couples, or even with people who maybe individuals come into therapy and they're in a relationship or whatever. It's like that's the trend. Like you see where like the connection has just been kind of lost, and it's not always intentional. It's just like, life has happened and we've forgotten that we have to still nurture this relationship that we did in the beginning. It's like you did all this work to get somebody, date, and all this stuff. It doesn't stop to keep that connection. Like you still have to continue those things to keep that connection there.
But that's the part, is that, and I've heard people say this, is that you have to wake up every day and choose your partner. Like every day you're waking up and saying, like, I intentionally am choosing to continue to love and trust and honor this person, because this is the person I want to be with. And I think when you neglect choosing your partner every day is when your relationship just slides right on down, right? And I think once you add kids into that, now we're just talking about a whole nother woo, woo, because it's hard when it's just two people, but now you add a third, a fourth, a fifth, right? And so now the time and the energy when you're done being a dad or when you're done being a mom and then saying, oh, I'm choosing you today, like, sir, my cup is empty. I don't got nothing for you. Right. And I mean, when you think about for yourself, even, right, did you find it difficult to transition from being husband and wife to then husband, wife, mom, and dad, and kids?
Yes. No, and I'll elaborate on that. So I tell people this story a lot. Like it's like one of those things where it's like you have that wake up call moment. Like, oh man, this is different. So like getting married kind of younger, right? I was 24, and like we decided to kind of grow together. Pursue grad school and all that type of stuff, and kind of build together, right? So we had a lot of freedom. Like we would travel or just my wife would hang with her friends. I go hang with my friends. There was no like we didn't need structure. Like it was no like schedules. It was just like what you got going on down. Oh, let's do it. Oh, okay. Like a lot of spontaneous stuff, right? And then that like after the very first child, like that went out the window, like because we learned very quickly, like oh, who's picking up that kid today? Like, are you picking up that kid today? Well, I thought you were. It's just like it became this thing. It's like, all right, we gotta really kind of like settle down and have some more structure. We can't live this freestyle life that we once had. And that was a big adjustment. That's probably like the biggest adjustment. Like was trying to learn like how to make it fit. Because like your kids, like they're totally relying on you for the most part, especially in the very beginning, at least. And just the idea of okay, I gotta take you somewhere, daycare or school if someone's not at home, then I gotta make sure coordinate getting you picked up. Those things could cause a lot of issues, and that's one thing that that kind of sparked it with us was just like we've got to figure just the dynamic of this out.
Yes, that transition from freestyle to wait, schedule.
Mm-hmm.
Who's up?
Mm-hmm.
And then, all the, I think sometimes also this is where like resentment comes in, right? Because it's almost like
Right.
you love your kids, you want your kids, right? But also like, dang, y'all came and now there's no freedom, right? And again, parents don't want to talk
Right.
about this because you feel guilty because you're like, okay, well, you know, I brought these kids here. Yes, you brought these kids here, and it's okay to feel a little bit like almost as if you're like mourning the freedom that you used to have and the person that you used to be able to be. But if you say that out loud to anybody, people are like, oh, you're so ungrateful. All these people want kids and they can't have them, and you have them and you're complaining. And it's like, but it's not complaining. Like, I love my children, and I also miss having that freedom that me and my wife or me and my husband used to have where we could just jump on a plane and be like, oh, we go into Jamaica tomorrow.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
It's a big difference.
Big difference. Because, and I think a huge part of, like, I didn't realize from my partner and I, we got pregnant very early on in our relationship. But prior to having kids, we were traveling all over the place. So then I got pregnant and it was like, It's like the whole world stopped. And now we were just stationary in this house. And I'm looking at this man like,
What are we doing? How do we get here?
I was ready to go travel some more. Wait a minute. Right? And then all of the things, having to learn yourself because when you become a parent, you're doing this for the first time, right? Especially that first time around. Like you don't know how you're going to be, you don't know, and especially for women, I think, there's that fear of like, am I going to get postpartum depression? Am I going to be able to lose this weight? And how am I going to feel? Am I going to have enough help? All the things, worried about your career. And then again, and then there's also then going back to, oh, wait, and you also have a relationship you have to maintain. By the way, your husband still needs you after you just breastfed that baby all day and clean the house and you feel like crap and your poor stomach is still doing all the things,
You're tired from lack of sleep.
right? When do you think it got easier
Um,
to get back from the kids and to get back to having more time for the
I
relationship?
think as the kids get older, and I think this is also important too. Like you gotta think about. Well, I think before you have kids, one, who can be your support system, right? Because number one thing I hear for people struggle is finding a babysitter. All right, somebody can watch their kids for a little while they can have some time, quality time. So who's going to be around? Some people are some isolated a little bit more than others. So that's something to really consider. When you're having kids and like, what kind of support you can get. Because I get it. I hear some people say, "Oh, we do everything together. Bring my kid everywhere." Like, okay. How's that for your relationship though? Just the two of you, because at some point this kid's gonna be 18 and is gonna be deuces, right? I'm out. Potentially, either they go off to school or just want to live their own, do their own thing at some point. So what happens to you and your spouse or your partner? Like, what are you guys doing for yourselves? And you can't just put that on hold for 18 years. But yeah, I would say as they got a little older and we had us a system of support people around us, that's one reason why we ended up moving. I ended up moving from Tampa to my South Florida because my wife wanted more support to be around her parents and things like that. And they at a stage where they're young enough to help us and like they want to be involved. That's a big difference too. So I think having that support system is a big part of trying to have a connection in your relationship because if you can have somebody watch your kids, access ability to do a lot more.
Yes. And see, I'm on the other side of that, right? Like my parents have always been there, but my mom made it very clear of like, girl, I'm going out. I have my life. I'm going to live my life. I raised my two kids already. So I'm not really interested in helping you raise yours. And again, this is very Caribbean mother. There's a lot of Caribbean moms who have this feeling that like I raised my kids already. I'm not necessarily here to be. I'm like I can pop in and out, but I'm not here to really do extended sleepovers for a night or anything like that. And again, like you just have to roll with it, right? So my partner and I, we we have these two kids and we have to figure it out, and that's been a challenge for us because everything we do, we don't have parents that, I mean, his parents are deceased and then mine don't have the ability to help me and aren't necessarily interested. And we don't really have people around like that we would want to leave our kids with. So it's every couple is really different. So we've had to get a little bit more, what's the word, creative, right? So when the kids are at school, we try to like do breakfast together, or we try to do something during the day while the kids are away. Or when the kids go to sleep, we try to watch our movies or, just be in the house doing whatever we need to do while the kids are sleeping or while the kids are at school. So we've had to be a lot more creative. But yeah, I mean, I've always been so happy for people who have their families, because that
definitely makes a big difference. Definitely makes a big difference.